Hey everybody, welcome first of all to the TikTok. Here we are embarking on a podcast episode right now. I just want to say hi to my TikTok friends joining us. Hello, Jan. It's good to see you. Tracy's on here. Hey, Tracy. So just give me a second for this. We're doing a live podcast recording. So meaning this podcast will be available to listen to on the thing, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you hear your podcast, on YouTube. It's going to start running some videos on YouTube. So welcome to that. We are not officially doing the podcast yet. The recording thing, I just wanted to give it a minute for people to get on here and for me to say hi. Hi, TDO. What's going on? Mark, how you doing out there? It's good to see you. Libra is here. Casey, what's up? Thank you guys for joining. Arkansas 420. Hello. It's good to see you. Billy Joe. Good to see you. Jan now, Michelle out there, user 70, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's Jan again. Thank you for liking the podcast. Those of you who will, go ahead and press like on that thing. You know, tap the screen whenever you hear something you like, or even that you dislike, go, like that, and just know that like it's taking all of your heart to stay on it. On here, and we are going to start the podcast here in just a second. What I did today, I'm not sure if you follow me here on TikTok. Even if you do follow me, sometimes it doesn't show you, in real time what's going on. But I opened it up for questions from the TikTok world, from my universe on here for this podcast, this episode of the podcast, so I could answer some questions or address some topics. So we got a couple in there. Let's see. You still have not told me your favorite pickle. I think my favorite pickle is just your general, the big, large dill pickle. That's my favorite pickle. And I am notorious for sneaking those things in movies because I love pickles and popcorn. Pamela, what's going on? Amber, how you doing? Coast, what's up? Tam, I hope you all are having a great kickoff to this week. Might as well have a good week. You know what I'm saying? Might as well have a good one. And I know some are just, consumed by everything going on in the world right now. Here's what I would say. For a moment, be consumed by what is happening in your world. Apply your hands to the things that can make a difference in your world. And yes, there are global things that we can together influence, but what is it in your life that only you can influence? You know what I'm saying? What is it that maybe that we are ignoring in our life that only we doing something can address and can help? Let's not wait for other people to take action on the things that we can do to better ourselves, better our families. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't help. It doesn't help complaining about who's in office or who's going to be in office. If your children are hungry, what helps is you preparing a meal. And I know that sounds simple. It sounds kind of silly when we put it like that. But there are so many things that really equal that. Me preparing a meal for those that I'm responsible for. Because preparing a meal can also be a metaphor and an analogy for me feeding, me being at service, at the service of those that I can touch, that I can affect, that maybe someone else in a higher, position might have authority on all this and that, but these are the things I can do. And there's always something we can do. You guys ready to start the podcast? Let's start the podcast. Let's set a goal on TikTok if you can throughout this. If you're watching, it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be a really good episode. I'm taking some of the questions from here. I might even look as we go and apply some of the questions and comments that you have from here as we're recording the podcast. We got different worlds. Listen, my following base is literally from preachers to prostitutes. Like I've got everyone in the mix, from Pampers to Depends. I've got everyone here, and I am I am a good middle ground, not a soft like, oh, he doesn't really say anything of value because he tries to stay right in the mainstream middle. No. Mainstream doesn't want anything to do with me because I'm too positive for some, I'm too secular for others, I'm too brown for some, I'm too white for others, but for whatever reason, attraction, vibration, frequencies draw toward each other. And so those who are finding me on your For You pages or on your, in your feed and stuff, there's a reason that I'm there. It's probably because we are in some way on the same vibration and the same frequency. You can hear with clarity when the old school radios, remember the old school radios? Hey, let's go ahead and just start the podcast. In 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome everybody. To the Think Twice Rocker Advice podcast. My name's Elijah. I'm so glad to be with you. We are joined today live from our friends here at TikTok. And so everyone at TikTok, if you can, just go ahead and tell me where you're from, and I'll read those off as we do this and still make it interesting for the listeners. But what I was just sharing with my friends on TikTok was this, is that we are attracted to other things and other people that are within our frequency. Tracy from Arkansas is chiming in. And so Iowa's chiming in. We're just going to, New Bedford's coming in here. Pennsylvania's running in hot. Good afternoon, Elijah. Hi, Ginger. Arizona's here. We've got people from all over the place coming in. South Carolina is here. So what we tend to do is we tend to draw people and draw things in that are on the same frequency level. Why do I use the word frequency? Is it because you're from the West Coast and you're trying to be all woo? No. I'm from the South. I was born in Dallas. I was raised in Arkansas. My family's all from Los Angeles. But when I say frequency, here's the easiest way to understand that. I'm from the old school. In the old school, we had radios, the receiver on the radios at home. They had these big giant knobs, and the big knobs would be that you could draw. You could change the station, and when you change the station, it was like between frequencies. It was like, and you would keep turning until you would hit exactly the right spot. And exactly the right spot, it would go from all this in between frequencies to the right frequency, and in the right frequency, when the right position, it picks up the thing. And so maybe you were on there and you're like, oh man, I would love to hear some Sister Christian. I just hope that's on, because that's how it used to work in the old times. In the olden days, you would have to go on and you would have to call the radio station. The request line is open. We'd call the radio station and we'd wait for the song that we wanted to put on our mixtape, and we'd wait there and we'd scroll through, and then, if we wanted to hear Sister Christian, then we'd tune in, and finally, what is it we hear? Sister Christian, the time has come, doon diddle diddle doon, and you know that you're the only one. I don't know if YouTube's gonna play this because I'm singing too much of the song, and it's sorry, Night Ranger, if I'm making money off of your creation. As you can tell, I'm a karaoke level. But you hear that, and the reason you can hear it with clarity is because you got to the place on your receiver where you were in the right frequency to receive what was being said. Now, those that I end up in front of, you know how people have mission statements? My mission statement I wrote a long time ago is to influence those who influence the world. And the reason I wrote that is, one, because it's in my heart, not just as a desire that I want to accomplish, that I am someone who wants to be a voice of influence into influencers of the world. And this was long before the term influencers was a thing, okay? It wasn't a thing when I wrote this mission statement, when I wrote this statement down about what my purpose, kind of the thing, overall thing that my life speaks of, and that is influencing influencers. influencer wasn't a job title back then. It was just meaning that you are in the position to hold influence in your world. And all of us are, even if it's just like I'm a single parent of a child, you have such great influence that goes from you and the way that you think into your child and the way that they think and the way they live life at their school and through their jobs. Your legacy, our legacies carry on, and they have impact and they have influence. And so what we have to do is we have to realize I am an influencer, but the thing on my life, not just the desire to influence people, but the actual gifting. We all have different giftings. The actual gifting and the fruit that grows on this tree that is named Elijah is that I end up influencing a lot of people that are world influencers. And that should be a really good news point for you to hear, because if you are on this frequency, you're not here by accident. I believe that things have lined up in our lives at this time where you know how the right people appear at the right time for a different purpose? I believe I have appeared in your life right now. Why? Because the gifting on my life is to be a voice of influence on influencers. You in your life, I believe, are walking in a season where you will start to see more and more influence. That means you have more impact. Your words carry more weight. Your opinions are valued. You will find yourself in positions and in relationships where when you speak, it wasn't like before where people are just like, whatever. But the thing that is about you is that you will go where you're celebrated and people will celebrate you in those environments. That's part of it also, is leaving the places you're tolerated and going to the places that you're celebrated and being among your people. For a while, it's okay to sit alone at a table because you have the experience of sitting at tables filled with people that really didn't care or value what you had to say. So you have to bring yourself to the position and to the place where, like, you know what? I would rather sit alone than I would surrounded by people who don't even know that I'm there. And some of you are in that state. And as you do that, what happens is you start to weed out all these other voices. You start to weed out all these other things. And when I say weed out, that means plucking up the weeds. There's a spiritual principle found in it's in the Torah, and it's the book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 3, outside the Torah, but still in that belief system, is the spiritual principle is this: there's a time for everything under the heavens. There's a season and a time, and there's a time for planting, is what one version says, and there's a time for plucking up that which was planted. What that means is there's sometimes that things are planted in our life, in our minds, in our hearts. And when those things are planted, they serve as weeds. Now, weeds are interesting because weeds go under the surface and they will be the strongest there, and they will wrap themselves around the roots of the good things. So you may have a tree that is a fruit tree. And that fruit is, let's just say peaches, because I love peaches. Peaches are my favorite fruit. That's my favorite season, is peach season. And so that thing is healthily producing this fruit, this peaches. And I, on the outside, I am someone outside, and I'm able to enjoy the fruits of this tree that is planted. But what I don't see is that along the pathway, someone has planted, someone has dropped in seeds, and those seeds are of weeds, and the weeds go down, and they will wrap themselves around the root system of the peach tree. And where you see the effect over time is that the peach tree will stop producing the fruit that it's there to produce. And so what we have to do is we have to have seasons in our life where we assume that we are just like that tree, and we start looking at what is it that's not flowing from us anymore? What is it that used to be so natural? It could be kindness, and it could be like, well, why am I not kind anymore? And it could be that something deep down is planted a seed, and that seed has taken, just like a weed, and it started to choke the life out of the root systems. And when the root is affected, the fruit is affected. Oh, don't make me preach up in here. When the root is affected, then the fruit is affected. And we can look, what are the symptoms that I'm having? And that takes us right into today's, one of the questions on today's TikTok that came in for this podcast, for this episode. And I thought, well, this is kind of right in line with what I was talking about on the podcast anyway. And that is this, dealing with grief, but not just dealing with grief, but dealing with long-term grief. Let me, and stick with me on this, because I think all of us have experienced the feeling of grief. We've had to deal with the feeling of grief. If you're here and you're saying, I've never dealt with grief, I would say that's probably correct. You've never dealt with the grief. Therefore, you have enabled yourself to be in denial. Now, I don't know your story. It could be that everything in your life has gone completely perfectly. I don't know anyone that has but if that's you, that's great. Get around me, man. Rub off on my life, because I need that to my life. But most of us have dealt with some sort of loss in our lives where grief has surfaced itself. And we see there's 5 stages of grief. What I've found is the 5 stages of grief, and I'm going to kind of shotgun some of this information, and those of you who want to research more of it, then you feel free to do that, because this is not like this is not a paid therapy session where we go over all the details of your personal issues, but I do want to touch these bases that for me, denial is my drug of choice. That I'm just going to be honest with you. For me, denial is my drug of choice. I like to just numb out and act as if nothing is going wrong. I had a 20-year marriage, and I will speak, so you'll know going in, I will speak nothing but good of any relationship that I've ever been in. And the reason why is because I have future friendships. I have current relationships. I have things that I want to set an example that if something should go sideways at some point with that relationship, I want everyone to know the way that I operate when I move forward, and I don't care what the details are, I will release positive things about these people. Why? Because these people are still really people. They were at one time the people I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And so why in the world would I now, because it didn't work out for whatever reasons, would I now be releasing the seeds that are weeds? Because I found that when I throw out a weed seed, I'm not talking, once again, I'm not talking California talk here. I'm talking about planting. If I throw out that, it never makes it beyond my fence and it lands in my own yard. So yes, I may curse them with my words, but I'm cursing myself with those same words. I will never go beyond what I release others. The leash I give others is the same leash, the same length of leash that I am allowed to live by myself. And so therefore, I'm going to be very cautious about the way I project the stories of other people. Why? Because on their side, they have a whole nother story that is their unique story. So I will honor that in any way that I can. So I want to say that as I'm going into this. But I was in a 20-year marriage, and we have 3 beautiful kids from it. The youngest one graduated high school last year. And so everyone is, technically a grown adult, and I'm proud of each and every one of them. That marriage ended in divorce. And when that ended in divorce, I kind of just thought I was going to just carry on as if nothing ever really affected me emotionally. And I kind of did. Now, when I say I kind of did, I will say this. There was a lot of alcohol involved. That there was a lot of self-coping and self-medicating that I was doing that would help me, because alcohol wasn't the problem. It was actually the solution for my life at that time. Temporarily, what it did is it helped numb the symptom of hurt, the symptom of memories, the symptoms of grief were not able to pop up beyond the surface. Why? Because they were numbed by substance. And it wasn't just that, it would be other things. And so so what I would do is I would self-medicate, okay? And I would do it myself. Why? Because it's the cheapest way to do it. I found that a bottle of Captain Morgan's is a lot cheaper than a therapy session. And so I would say, I'm going to go. And then when I didn't have money for Captain Morgan's, I would go buy me, one of those, the gross vodka with the red label, and the cheap, $4 handle of vodka, just but it would do the job until it didn't do the job. And so what happened was I never really felt the effects of grief. Sure, they would pop up every now and then, but after so long where we kind of knew it was over and finally we cut the cord and ended it, it was just like a sigh of relief, like, oh, finally I'm out of that thing. I'm sure she felt the same on the other side. That's her story to tell. And so what happened though is I almost immediately, I say immediately, I took some time there, but I didn't really take time healing at all. I took time just moving forward, processing, raising kids, doing my thing, and then I got married a second time. And that marriage was short-lived because we both kind of realized pretty quickly that we just rushed into this, and I can look back clearly now, having gone through some therapy on the thing, is like, oh, well, it makes sense that you rushed through this and you rushed to this because this is a woman who is in your age group, shares your belief systems, has kids that are within your children's age group. And so for me, having had been married for 20 years, raising kids, I was like, oh, this, internally, subconsciously, I'm sure my subconscious thought that's what you need. You need someone to help that gets you, that understands you. And so we got married. It was not a fit. We're on great terms. Nothing bad to say about her. But it ended in a divorce. Now, at the end of that marriage, which was a shorter marriage, really short compared to the other one, I realized that there were some feelings coming up that it was like, whoa, this is really, really heavy. This is really extreme. There was these feelings and these symptoms, yes, of grief, but things that were attached to grief. And it was like, whoa. And so what was happening, though, I realized what was happening is the stuff that I was drinking through, the stuff that I was self-medicating from, the stuff I was numbing from in my own way. Everyone has their own way that they do things, and some will look down on others for like, well, you're using substance, you're using drugs, you're using that. Yeah, but you could be, you don't get over someone by getting under somebody else. You ever heard that principle? There's that principle of like you running from person to person just so that way you will forget, in theory, the next person. That's the same thing. It's the same thing, overeating because of that. There's things we do at this. So I wasn't drinking to be social. I was drinking at this problem. And that's the way I was medicating. And so now that stuff has dissipated and these feelings, these symptoms started coming up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the grief. These are the symptoms from the hurt version of me that I never dealt with. Because when I say the hurt version, I'm not just saying the thing that hurt me at the end of the relationship. I'm saying the things that I was hurt before I even had that 20-year marriage. The things that young Elijah, young me, little kid me, teenage me was not fully grown and fully healthy and fully capable of being a person that is able to present themselves as, here I am a complete Now, none of us are going to be able to get to the place where we are offering somebody else a complete version of us. If you're looking for a relationship without red flags, because I see a lot of that, on the dating kind of content, is like, oh, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. Well, if you're looking for someone without red flags, you better hope that the people out there are not looking for the same thing, because guess what you come with? And guess what I come with? Red flags. We all have things. We all have issues. We all have, the key is that we are personally working on the issues, that we are identifying what needs to be worked on, and we're in the gym working on those muscles that are just so weak right now in our lives. And so it's not about us presenting ourselves or looking and finding someone who is a complete package. Yes, it may be on our checklist, but that doesn't mean just because it's on our checklist that it has to be that's fulfilled for them to be a good person. May not be the person for you, may not be the person you want to deal with this issue because of the last thing, but it doesn't mean they're a bad person because this thing exists. I found that red flags exist like red lights. Red lights, we never come to a red light and say, oh, this road's horrible because it's full of nothing but red lights. And we're frustrated because if there were no red lights, it would be dangerous. So red lights sometimes are things that are just saying, no, you can still move forward, but for right now, I'm going to put up a signal, and this signal is an indicator to stop, to pause on the journey. And so when people present themselves with red flags, when we present ourselves with red flags, with issues, it doesn't necessarily mean we can't move forward in this relationship and the pursuit of a healthy relationship, but it does mean it's a time to pause and consider and make sure things are clear in the intersection of life that we're in before we press on the gas and move forward. That's the way I see these red flags. And I had these things popping up at the end of that marriage, the second marriage. I had these things popping up that were just like, this is a lot. And those were symptoms. Those were symptoms of the issue. Now, here's where we get back to where we started. And once again, this is a podcast episode. I know people here on TikTok are watching live. I appreciate that. But I'm in no hurry to get where I'm going. So that I'm laying it out for us to play it out in our lives. The issue of grief and long-term grief. The question and comment was, can you talk about long-term grief? So long-term grief embodies regular grief, if that makes sense. So we have to touch on the regular grief. And long-term grief can be, I looked it up just to make sure I have the clinical definitions, and what it boils down to is that long-term grief can be a result of a disorder, or it's not in order, of a paused or a prolonged. That's the word I'm looking for. Prolonged. A prolonged grief, meaning I'm prolonging the grief, meaning I'm procrastinating really in allowing myself to deal with this grief. That was part of the first marriage grief. Showed up at the end of the second marriage, and the girl in the second marriage had nothing to do with some of the stuff I was dealing with. Why? Because I prolonged this, working on this until this time. And then it all comes, that's the thing. It all comes to the surface, okay? We're going to deal with issues. We think because we ignore things, like I said, denial is my drug of choice. If I deny it, that I'll never have to deal with it. But the truth is, I'm only prolonging the process. I will have to deal with it. You're going to deal with issues either on the front end, in the middle, or on the back end of the thing. And here's what I found. If you look at bullet injuries, if you look at the what happens when someone gets shot, is in the front where they get shot is a clean hole. In the back, the exit wound rips out a bunch of stuff. And so the exit wound is always way bigger and has more negative results coming out. Why? Because it's tearing things apart. So it's the entrance that looks clean, but the exit. And so if we wait to deal with things for the exit, for the end, what happens is that we are dealing with a way more injured version of what it is that we're going to try to work on. Doesn't mean it can't be repaired. Doesn't mean it can't be healed. Doesn't mean it can't be replaced in some instances. But it does mean it's going to be a bigger issue to deal with at the end. So that's why we have to encourage ourselves. There was a guy, an Old Testament guy, if you're into Bible stories, named David. And David came to a place in his life where he was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't take it anymore. So he spent 1.5 years. He was running for 7 years from the current king that was the king over those people. And he was the second in line. According to the story goes, he was the second in line to take the leadership. And when he took waiting in that period, he took 7.5 years that he was running from this guy because the current king was like, I'm going to kill this guy. But why? Because it's the new version of him. None of us like the new version. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like that. I like Justin Timberlake, not not Justin Bieber. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I don't like Bieber, but what I'm saying is like I'm old school. I like the older version. Why? Because I am the older version. And so when a younger version of me pops up and they're like, oh, look at this guy. He's got a great low hairline that was born naturally. He's got great hair. His name's also Elijah. What? He's a public speaker. He's a comic. Oh, everyone loves him as a comic. And he's got success. Oh, he's got a new special coming out on Netflix. He's got all this stuff. And look at his abs. And I'm like, I don't like necessarily the thought of a newer, better version coming in and taking my place. That's what's happening with the king. His name was Saul. He was like David, and so David is like, dude, you know what? I am just trying to do the right thing. I didn't ask for this position. I didn't ask for any of this. I was out there tending to sheep at my dad's house. And then this happens. And now this guy is like, and so he says, I'm taking a time off, and he goes and he takes all his people who were following him, and they go to a land called Ziklag. And in that Ziklag, he takes 1.5 years there, and it doesn't work out. Things just get worse as he thinks it's going to get better. He's making moves for things to get better, but it just gets worse. And in the end of that worst period, it says that he does something. It says that he encouraged himself. He stirred himself up. He stirred up the gift that was inside of him. And that's where we come to this, is that there's sometimes when we have to dig in. We can't rely on others. We can't, it'd be great if because I've been working with people on life coaching, on mindset development stuff. I've been doing that for 3 decades. It'd be great if I could be there every morning as you're getting ready and saying, now listen, I want you to know that you are the best version of you've ever been. You are, and speak all this stuff. That would be great. But it doesn't necessarily take all that. What it takes is not me speaking it to you, or Tony Robbins speaking it to you, or Ed Milet speaking it to you, or Mel Robbins speaking it to you. What it takes is us speaking it to us, to ourselves, looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, you don't feel like it. You feel horrible right now. You feel like a loser right now. You feel very incompetent right now, but you're going to do it anyway because there is a successful version on the inside of you. There is something more on the inside of you than what you're seeing right now. We're seeing right now these elements of our real life, and we are the most aware of the unsightly things in our real life. You know what I'm saying? You can ask any woman, really, if you compliment them and say, oh, you are so beautiful in this way, they usually can give you a list. And there's a reason I say women. They usually can give you a list of things that they don't like about themselves at that time in their appearance. Now, that's not a sexist statement. That is a generalized, like, in general, that's my experience has been that. Why we don't see it as much as men is because men tend to be more idiots in this area. Men tend to be like, yeah, I'm good the way I am. Look at my belly. I'm still the same size waistline since I was in high school. But we're not admitting that we got a big giant gut that hangs over the waistline and you're just going under the thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, for whatever reason. But we have to be people who can speak it to ourselves. And that doesn't mean we necessarily feel it. Because remember, your feelings cannot dictate your actions. Your actions are the things that will end up driving your feelings sometimes, okay? So why I say that is because when things are going well, we feel well, and then we do things that are in line with that. But when things are not going well, we can't just we can't just be at the service of and at the whim of the way that we feel or circumstances around us. Because what if you were in an accident? What if you were in a car collision on the road and you don't feel well about it and there's wreckage all around, and because you don't feel well about this car, you refuse to remove yourself from that position, and you're like, nope, I had the wreck, this is real, everyone sees me, everyone's driving by and they can see, and I'm an idiot because I didn't see the brake lights, and now here I am, I've ruined their part of their life, I've ruined my thing, and look at my car, it was beautiful, and blah, 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 all this stuff, and we just refuse to move forward from that because we don't feel good. Well, it sounds silly, but what we all would do is we'd figure out a way to get ourselves away from the side of the road and get our vehicle, if needed, towed to where it needed to be, and figure out how we're going to get a ride tomorrow to work. We would start figuring out the thing to move forward. And so we can't operate off of the way we feel because our life right now may be full of wreckage, because we're not going to feel good about that. What we have to do is we have to take action in order to move forward. Detours don't change destinations. Detours don't change destinations. Remember that. All of us have this sense of like, I'm moving, here's where I want to go. I see this in their life. That's what I kind of want. This is those are great destination points, but along that pathway, detours will happen. And when detours happen, it doesn't mean we are failures because we didn't navigate, that we didn't operate without flaws, or because something happened in our life that causes us to be out of wind and out of breath. No, it's our job to still take action. It's also, listen to me, it's also our job to be people who see someone else on the side of the road and pull over and say, is there anything I can help you with? Because sometimes, and you know this to be true, I know this to be true, sometimes we internally just feel like I don't have another ounce of energy in me. I don't have another move to make because every one of my moves right now seem to be ending in destruction, ending in chaos, ending in failure. And so it's our responsibility, if we're not in that season, to look at other people who may find themselves in a season of like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And we pull over and say, hey, you know what? Obviously, you got some issues here. You're a friend of mine. Can I offer you a ride to work tomorrow? You can't have my car. I need my car. You can't have, I can't do this every morning, but I can do it tomorrow morning. I can get you through this week while you figure this part out. And what I'm saying is not just a literal thing, if you see them, but also it's an analogy and a metaphor for how we should help each other in life. Is that if someone's at a pause and a standstill and they've got nothing else, they feel like they've got nothing else, what we can do is we can offer them hope. It doesn't always have to be in the form of resources that we are answers to each other's prayers in their life. It can be in the form of service. And the service can be, today I'm just going to listen to them because they need to vent. They need to get this thing out of here and into the atmosphere so they are not holding it and it's not just doing its work on their lives. And so as we are in the process of grief, what we have to understand is that we didn't plan on some of these things happening. And as they happen, we now may have that issue in our lives for the rest of our lives. But what we need to do is not say, how do I regain that? Because there's some things we can't regain. There's some things we don't need to regain, but there's some things we can't regain. We can't regain a lost loved one who has passed away. We can't regain that. We can't, and some things we, like I said, we don't need to regain. We don't need to draw back and reach back to relationships that were not good for us in the past just because we don't have a current relationship. And we're like, I would rather be with somebody than nobody. And I'd rather sit back at the table where I'm not valued than sit at a table alone. No. During this season, it's not good to reach back. It's good to only reach forward. And reaching forward may look alone. It may look independent right now. It may look solo for a season, but it doesn't mean you are losing ground. Losing ground is going back to what it is that was so unhealthy for you before. It hasn't gotten more healthy. It hasn't changed. The dynamics, well, you don't know the personal story. You're right. I don't know the personal story. And yes, people can change. They do change. But I would say that it takes time. Just like it takes time for you to change, for you to make things different. I don't know if you've ever tried to lose weight in a healthy way, in a way where you're just like, I'm not going to medicate toward this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to eat the proper amount of portions. That would be a calorie deficiency for me. And so gradually weight is going to come off of me, and it may not be immediate, but it's going to be worth it, because everything that comes off of me, I'm going to now value. And now I'm going to think twice about the next time I really want to eat this thing that I know I used to eat all the time. Why? Because I've been working hard for that thing. And so we value what we sacrifice for. We value. Sacrifice for attaches value to. And so now I value something because I'm working toward that thing. I'm sacrificing, and now it's valuable to me. And so, yes, someone else from the past may, our old relationships, they may change. The dynamics may change. But what I would say is it takes time to truly change. You can apply a new habit or a new principle for a short amount of time, and it looked like you're doing everything different because we're describing what we do now versus what we did before. Catch up with us in a year from now. See if we're still applying those changes. You know what I'm saying? It takes time. It takes time. Healthy things take time, and unhealthy things, we don't get there immediately. We usually end up in a really unhealthy spot as a result of time doing unhealthy things. And it gradually got worse and worse and worse and worse. And so as we are committing ourselves to deal with the grief that anyone, we first have to commit that I am going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it on the front end if that's where I am. I'm going to deal with it in the middle if that's where I am, or I'm going to deal with it on the back end if that's where I am. And I would encourage you, if you're not on the back side of this thing, deal with it right now, because like I said before, it's the exit wounds that are the largest. It's the exit wounds that are like they rip things out. And so if you can catch it before the exit process and pluck up, remember the spiritual principle, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, pluck up that which was planted, the weeds that were planted, to get those things by the root and take them out, so that way our roots for our good things can begin to grow again. So when we're dealing with grief, here's what I found about grief is that grief does not work in order. There are symptoms of grief. There's anger, there's denial, there's sadness, there's symptoms of grief, but they are not necessarily in a certain order, and they can all show up together at certain times. And we can, years later, after something that we think we are completely over, years later, find ourselves being triggered by a song that we hear, by a picture, by an atmosphere, by a person's smell, we can be triggered, and it takes us right back into the thing that we thought we had gotten over. That's okay. Hear me. That's okay. Because we are in this world, okay? We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Let me say this. We are spiritual beings, eternal spiritual beings. This is what I believe. This is theology that I embrace. You don't have to embrace this, but at least listen to it and see if it makes sense for you. But we are living out a human experience. This human experience, though the spiritual being, the spiritual us, we are spirits housed in these bodies right now on this earth. And I mean, think about it. This earth is just a little bitty tiny dot in this giant and never-ending universe. And on that dot is smaller little bitty dots. 8 billion right now. 8 billion little bitty dots. We are one of those little bitty dots. Okay? And that's us. And we feel so real. We feel so big. We feel so like this, I am the, and to us we are, but we have to understand that we are very temporal on this dot called planet Earth. And in that temporal time, this is the only time that we get to experience the human experience. That's why I encourage people to embrace the concept of and versus or. What I mean by that is you can be this and this and this and this instead of I'm this or this. You can have independent thought. You can be someone who is administrative and creative. You don't have to be one or the other. You can be a musician and be able to organize a calendar. You can be responsible and spontaneous. You can be multiple different things. As a matter of fact, if you're not, if you only find yourself in it's either black or white, everything's gray. Hear me say that. Everything is gray. And you, my friend, are smack dab in the middle of it. And the more level of discomfort you have, it's because you gravitate toward having to be this or this. And you can't even pay attention to the side of this over here because you're worried that it's going to ruin your reputation with this over here and disqualify you from this. And here's what I would say, after living, I'm 52 years old. After all these years that I've been alive, I've found that most of my life I have been a servant to people pleasing. So I qualify to be able to say this to you. Why? Because I qualified through years and years of feeling like I am supposed to make others happy with me. Not make the others happy, but make others happy with me. My choices need to be something that pleases them. And no matter what you do, you're going to displease a lot of people, okay? Most people aren't thinking about us at all. But then there's the groups that are thinking about us, and we are wanting to please them or side against others. And it could be that there's a little of you. Me, I am someone who openly discusses spiritual things. I have a history of working with and in nonprofit organizations, in churches. I run a nonprofit organization where I go in and I speak to juvenile correctional centers, the inmates there, and prisons. I do this across the country, have done it for years. And some people would say you can't represent a spiritual movement. You can't represent a belief system of faith and look the way that you look, present the way that you present, because that's not traditional of the way it should be done. And the way that people are respected the most in this is if you look this way, if you translate that way. I would say this, that trends, styles, fashion, it's all decoration, it's all temporal. There was a time, think of it this simply. There was a time when everyone on earth that was wearing robes. All we ever knew was robes. All we ever knew was robes. And then one day, I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened. I don't know who it happened through. But one day, someone decided, I'm going to cut this robe right down on the bottom. And then I'm going to sew up these inseams. And then all of a sudden, pants existed in the culture. Now, when that person showed up, I can guarantee you, when that person showed up wearing pants, people their minds were blown. They were like, oh, who is this immodest? Who is it? I can see the form. They have legs and they're showing them. Woo! This had to be a giant issue. And then that person may have tried to share principles, be leaders, and I guarantee you it was met with resistance. Why? Because that was the person that was representing and doing a different style, a different fashion. Now, it's hard for us to think that simply in terms like this because we want to over-spiritualize and overemphasize things and traditions that we've always held on to. But I would say this, the more we do that, the more we disqualify ourselves from being able to operate in our full selves. You were held back through the span of eternity and released into this time, in this generation, in this day and age, and in this time, this generation, what you like, the things that you like, because most of us would say, if you would fit best in one generation, one era, what would that be? Most of us point to a different time. Oh, I'd love to go back to the time of Mayberry when I would just love to live that. First of all, Mayberry was made up. Secondly, did you notice that in Mayberry, the only person that was married in the whole town was the town drunk? Really? You want You think it was good back then? I would like to live back in the days, in the Bible days. I'd like to live in the Old West, and I'd like to, yes, that concept's great, but you know what you and I love? Air conditioning, heating. You know what we enjoy so much? Those of you who want to live back in the Bible days, you know what we love is I love toilets that flush. I bet you do too. Well, they didn't have plumbing back then. And so we're released here in this time, and we should be able to enjoy the fact that we're here. There's things that we have access to that no one else had access to. You are listening to the podcast right now on either YouTube, on Apple Music, on Spotify, on Simplecast. You're watching here live on TikTok. You may be seeing it on Instagram. There are things that we operate in right now that would have been considered witchcraft had it been introduced in other generations. Yet there is nothing new on this planet. Think about this. There's nothing new on this earth or planet that exists now that didn't exist throughout the history of this world. Everything that is here now was here and available then. We, though, live in a generation where this stuff has been developed. In the future, if there is a future, in the future, there will be more things that we didn't even know about in this time. What I'm saying is that if we limit ourselves to, I am only this, I'm a spiritual leader. Let me just say that for me. I used to work in churches. I am a spiritual leader. That means I need to, where's the line? Do I need to dress like the current spiritual leaders of today? Or do I need to back it up 30 years and dress like that? Do I need to back it up 40 years before that? Do I need to go into the 18th century? Do I need to go all the way back to Jesus? If I go back all the way back to Jesus, where I wear the robes and stuff like that, do I need to take that and go back all the way to the beginning? Because that is kind of where the whole thing started. And so now I'm all the way back to the beginning. What did they have in the beginning? No clothes. So now I'm supposed to be I'm supposed to be a great spiritual leader as a naked guy? Well, I'll bet you that would be resisted, and I'd be able to point to you and say, no, this was God's original plan. No, see, I think that all that stuff is petty. What's important is the message in which we're supposed to deliver, which is hope, love, compassion, forgiveness, healing. Yeah, those kind of things. That's the important stuff. This stuff, decorations, by the way, buy the new Laugh Anyway shirts. This stuff's just decorations. And so I don't have to be this and this. And I'm saying this, I'm using myself because I am my own point of reference. But in your life, you may be holding yourself back from being able to be free in areas because you say, I am only this, and this part I need to ignore. This thing that I really like over here, I need to ignore that. My friend, if it's not damaging to you personally and to your family, maybe you don't have to ignore that. Maybe you can write that book. And you're like, what, I failed? I'll share this with you. I failed 11th grade English. Guess what I have? 2 best-selling books. I'm a best-selling author. Yeah, failed 11th grade English. It never worked. Why does it work right now? Because I live in a generation, an era where you can speak like never before. You can break grammatical laws right now like never before. Some people don't care for it, but some people really like people who just speak plainly and don't have to edit everything that they do. And I live in that generation. So I can be someone who is not the greatest academically and also a best-selling author. I can be, see how that makes sense? You have things, multiple facets to you that you can be this and this. And so let's take it back to where we were before. in working with and dealing with grief, we need to understand that there's going to be symptoms to the things that pop up. Grief doesn't work in order. It doesn't have a like, okay, now you do this for this season and this amount of time, and then this happens here, and then this happens next after that. No. It can all show up at once over and over and over. And for those of us and those of you out there who would say, what about long-term grief? I'm dealing with something that has been long-term and I can't seem to move past it. Here's where we start. We start with jotting down the symptoms. Why do we do that? Because you have to treat the symptom as you look for the roots. Did you know the reason that I do comedy? Because I know a lot of people are brand new to me here on TikTok, and I get a lot of questions sometimes of like, all right, not a lot of questions. I get a question sometimes that comes up like, what do you do? I'm an entertainer. I'm a communicator. I've worked at public service in communication, starting from radio back in 1989 and 90 on through. I've always been in communication. I do a lot, but I am a comedian. My livelihood comes from comedy. Why do I do comedy? Because comedy is the hinge that opens the bigger doors for me. It's the gifting that makes room for me. So I can say things and access into people's ears easier as a comic than I can, hey, hire me a motivational speaker, hire me a life coach, hire me a guy who shares his faith, hire me. And some people aren't interested in that. But when you say, oh, a comedian, and I just go in and literally do what I was told to do. If I'm a plumber, I don't want to, if I'm hiring a plumber, I don't care what kind of leadership skills the guy has. I don't care what God that guy subscribes to. I don't care. I just need that guy to fix my toilet. And so when people hire me as a comic, what it does is opens up the door for me to earn credibility in their world as a good comic. And that's the doorway in. So when I take that, then I'm able to create a following. And the deeper the following wants to go with me, the more they know about me. And there's deeper things than just me writing stories and writing jokes. I can be multifaceted that way. And so when we're addressing long-term grief, what we want to do is we want to address the symptoms. And the reason I do comedy is because it addresses a symptom. The symptom is perfect timing. Symptom is something that needs to be numbed. It is very real, but there's a saying, laughter does good like a medicine. Here's what I found as a type 1 diabetic, having taken insulin shots all of my life, since I was 4 years old. I found that insulin is just a medicine that temporarily treats the symptom of diabetes. The symptom is my blood sugar goes high, but the problem is my pancreas doesn't produce insulin. My pancreas doesn't work. And so what I need is medication to treat the symptom. Oh. Sorry, it made me verify who I was. So I've got this symptom that's popping up. That has to be addressed. And so I apply medicine. And so what I do with comedy is laughter does good like a medicine. Sometimes people are so engulfed in their issues of life and very real issues, very real depressive moments, very real hurts and wounds, very real things, that what I can do is access that symptom. I can deal with the symptom and medicate that for a moment. Medication, I've gone through heart surgery. What they did was give me a medication that knocked me out while they opened me up and did the work needed in the heart. And that's what comedy does. Comedy, for me, is the tool I use to medicate and numb the person through this hour and a half that I have them there. They can numb. And while that's numbing, the presence of the other stuff I bring with me, the spiritual element, the peace, the love, the joy, the healing, the laughter. Everything that we are exudes to everybody else, if you didn't know that. So when you ever enter a room and you're like, oh, or did I walk in on something? Something's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can tell when there was tension in the room. You're like, oh, like that. Or you can tell when two people were flirting and you walk in the room, you're like, y'all gonna get in trouble. Like, you can tell there's an atmosphere released because we release not what we want, but what we are. We release what the substance of who we are is, because we're spirit beings and we live in the realm of spirit as well as the realm of the human. And so it gets into the atmosphere. And so here we are releasing that. I do comedy because I want to numb the symptoms of depression, anger. It's not going to cure them. It's not going to heal them. It's not going to fix it, but it enables them to be numb for a good hour, and things start to be dealt with in their heart issues through the rest of what I bring. Now, that's why I always encourage people, get into counseling, get into therapy. And you're like, some people are like, I tried it. It's not a good fit. Exactly what I would say. It's probably not a good fit. Try somebody else. You're not bound to have to be with that person. Well, I can't afford it. Well, then look online. Start listening to stuff. Feed what's here and here and here. Feed yourself with the things like, oh, this is exactly what I needed to hear. You know what I'm saying? And so that's where it starts. So we're going to deal with more about long-term grief and the steps in that on next week's podcast. We've been going for a good amount of time. I don't want to, I don't like listening to one guy for over an hour. I just don't. So I'm not going to subject you guys to it. I love you. Have a great day. You'll be able to hear some, this unedited thing on the podcast. Thank you for everyone that joined me on TikTok. I really appreciate you. Trying to grow my page there. So that way, building more influence, being able to spread more love, more hope, more life, more peace, more encouragement, more everything that we offer here. Fun, the whole and not or, you'll see me on here. You'll see me doing dances. Why? Because I'm not going to be here forever. No one's getting out of this thing alive. And I'm going to celebrate. Well, I've been on my deathbed and I would rather be dancing. So you'll see me doing all kinds of stuff on here. I'm not limited to anyone's definition. Rock on. I'm Elijah. Love you guys. Bye.